to Genesis chapter 9, and we're just going to really kind of buzz through some of the genealogy things and some of the lists of animals and some of the things. We're just going to kind of do like an overview of this. And with that, just kind of it's a little bit of a strange message. And I keep saying this as difficult. It's always difficult, but try and pull this together. I call this echoing, just because if you had studied this passage without studying the context leading into it, you'd probably be pretty confused, or what's the point? Why is this even recorded? Or why is it in the Bible? And then even I just want you to see that that things that are taught early on in the Bible, they seem to echo through the whole Bible, just like of this wave on wave on wave of like kind of like a repetitive nature to teach you things that are almost between the cracks. And in a certain sense, I hate teaching this way because it's not like ultra clear. But I hope I can bring across like this kind of overall picture that we're seeing here, and then maybe it'll help make some sense. So in Genesis 9:7, this is where we left off last week. It says, God says to Noah, he says, "And you be fruitful and multiply." And he says, increase in the earth greatly. And he says, and multiply on the earth. And, if you've not been sleeping, you probably recognize this. You're like, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. And you're like, yeah, God said that to Adam, and he's already said that to Noah once, and now he's saying it to Noah again. Like, this is the third time he said, I want you to fill the earth. I want you to multiply in the earth. I want you to, subdue the earth, and, I want humanity to reign and reign on this earth. And you're like, once again, it's like, you could say, well, it's nothing, but as it's repeated over and over, and then we're going to see it again in the future, and you're like, as it's repeated, you begin to think, this is how I think at least, okay? I think, well, maybe this is something that God wants. Like, ultimately, God has this plan that things would be good and sin would be wiped out and that man would be able to reign on this earth and that man would inherit this earth and that it would work out according to his plan. Like in the repetitive nature, I think we're supposed to begin to develop like, wow, this is something that God must really want, because he keeps seeming to say it, that he wants it to work out. He wants it to work out. He wants man to be able to multiply the earth and inherit and subdue it and be successful in this earth. And I think it's something that kind of points us to a future day when it works out the right way. So it says in Genesis 9:8, he says, and God said to Noah and his sons with him, he says, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your offspring after you. And he doesn't say what this covenant is. He just says, I establish my covenant, which is like a promise. He's like, I establish my promise with you. I have this promise for you, and it's for you, and it's for all the people who come after you, which includes all of us. He says, I am telling you there's this promise for you. There's this promise. And, we're going to see that he says, at least in one or two of these cases, that he says, I'm promising you that I will not destroy the earth with water again. And you say, well, that's water, but yet I just want you to pick up on certain patterns where God keeps saying, I established this covenant with you. There's this promise that I'm giving you. And people talk about the Adamic covenant, that God makes this promise to Adam, that he's like, the seed, your child will crush Satan's head, will destroy Satan. And it's like this promise that I'm promising you. And then he tells Noah, he's like, and in that you're like, okay, if he destroys Satan, there's this good earth that's coming for us where the bad is eliminated. And then he tells Noah, he's like, there's this promise for you that I'm not going to destroy you again, that is for your offspring and it's going to be good. And you're like, you just begin to sense that these covenants mean something. Next person that is going to deal with in Genesis is Abraham. And he says, Abraham, I'm making this covenant with you. I'm making this promise with you that one of your children will bring blessing to all of the earth. And we know that in his descendants is Jesus. And there's this promise for you that the world will be blessed through you. And you're like, yeah, these are individual covenants of individual things. But through the book, as they string together, I think in our mind we're supposed to say there's a promise for us. There's a promise for us. The next, another major one would be the Davidic covenant, where there's this promise to David. David, one of your children will sit on the throne forever and ever. This good king will sit on the throne. You're like, yeah, good king, but But in it, I think you're supposed to see there's a promise for you guys. There's a promise. And you think, if a good king sits on the throne forever, that means that good will one day reign forever. And I think when we see this word like covenant, this promise, I think that it's supposed to kind of build in our mind, like a building pattern that's like, oh, there's a promise coming, I just think that we're supposed to see there is good on the horizon. So he says in verse 10, he says that there's this covenant for you and every living creature that is with you. He's like, there's this promise that is for you. And then he says in 11, I will establish my covenant with you. He's like, he just keeps repeating. He's like, I will establish this covenant with you. And he says that never again shall all living flesh be cut off by water. And you're like, yes, by water. But what I want you to pick up on is how much he's pushing this idea of a promise. He says again in 14, he says, when I bring clouds over the earth and they cover the earth, he says, and there's the bow in the clouds. He says, when there's this rainbow in the clouds and I'm looking down on the earth, he says, I will remember my covenant between you and every living creature. He's like, again, I'm telling you, every time I see it, I will remember that I have made a promise to you, my covenant that I have made to you. And then he says again, when the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between me and you and every living creature. He's like, again and again in 17, God said to Noah, he says, this is the sign of the covenant that I have made between you, that I have established between me and you. He's like, I think God wants us to believe that there's a promise for us, that there's a covenant for us. I think that by repeating this, he's saying, let it be clear in your mind that there is a promise. And I think he says in one of the instances that he won't destroy with water, but I think because it's a pattern that keeps happening over and over through the Bible, and it doesn't always deal with water. You know, with Moses, there's this covenant that there will be righteousness through a law, and that law will be fulfilled through Jesus, that each of these contains eternal life and this good that will reign on the earth. I believe he's painting in our picture a picture in our mind that, wow, God does not want death to reign on the earth. He has promise for us. And I think that this is the idea behind a repetitive nature in the Bible, why it just keeps repeating wave on wave. Why do you keep saying this? And I think it's even more beyond the story that we're supposed to begin to think God is a God of promise. God is a God who wants good to dwell on the earth. And I think it's supposed to build in us something that is bigger. Now, all of this being said, I've so many times, I don't know, maybe 10, 11, 12 times, I've stood up here and I've been like, okay, I don't know if I'm a typical preacher. I don't think I am. There's no way I am, right? Probably not. But I keep standing up here and telling you, this is how I think it all plays out. And I've never heard anybody else like me, okay? I've never heard anybody else who's like kind of digging for like this patterning, picturing sort of deal. And I'm like, I feel like we establish it pretty clearly, but over and over I keep telling you, so this is how I think it works, and these are the things that I see, and these are the things that direct my view, and I keep trying to show them all to you, and I keep thinking, well, if they don't remember all of them, they're going to think I'm nuts when I'm telling them certain things. But one more time, I'm going to tell you in the same way that, if you picture it like this. We've been going through Adam's story, and we see this repetitive nature, like boom, 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 of these things happening that show us all the sides of salvation and all the elements of salvation. But then if you think maybe there's bigger waves that are happening, like each person, that each event that comes through the book of Genesis, that first it's Adam, and then it's Noah, and then it's Abraham, and then it's Joseph, and each of these people then show the bigger wave of salvation. Like there's like this repetitive nature that kind of like, it's like this pounding waves of like information that kind of lines all up, that is like this repetitive nature that's almost teaching something that is bigger than the words that they're made of, that is impressing in your mind to know the future, so to speak. And so this is what I'm going to try and pull together, and this is way more than I could pull together. And here's another thing I want to point out. I would say 90% of my teaching relies on memory, which is a bad deal. If part of you know my week, how I had this terrible, awful memory situation that went on. But I'm the sort of person, like every night my wife is like, could you go get me a glass of ice water, or did you get my ice water? And I'm like, no, so she sends me down to get her ice water. And this is funny, she's not even here, so like she'll confirm this for you. But I go down to get the ice water all the time, and I kid you not. I walk downstairs, I'm like, what am I down here for? And like any red-blooded American, I go to the fridge. I'm like, what do we got here? And I find myself a snack, and I usually eat something that she had set aside for lunch the next day. You know, I eat it, and I like sometimes I even do something stupid, like I set my phone in there when I'm in there looking for stuff. You know, I come back, I'm like, where's my phone? She's like, where's my water? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I went down. Like, then I'm perpetually trapped in a poor memory, and it's brutal, it's awful. So if this relies on memory, you guys are in such hopeless shape. I'm not even going to tell you what I did yesterday because it's too embarrassing. Like I didn't know up from down for a while. But anyway, it requires memory, okay? And part of this is if you were to study this passage without studying from the beginning and remembering sequences and events and all of these things and then tying it into the New Testament and how it applies to Jesus, it requires so much that I can't even tie it all together in one message so many times. And maybe you've felt that frustration that I have trying to bring this across. But just listen to this and see if you see an echoing pattern as we continue through this. And again, I've already skipped over so many patterns, even in what we covered this morning in the covenants, and then there's all of these lists of animals that I kind of skipped over that God says, you know, this is for all of the, you know, the birds and the beasts and the swarming animals and it is for, you know, every creeping thing. And like he puts these same lists that he listed back here with Adam, he lists again with Noah. And you're seeing this repetitive nature, like wave on wave of why is it so repetitive? And I don't even go into all of it, but I'm going to try and give you a grasp of what I would call a wave-on-wave repetitive thing. So listen to this. In 9:20, it says, Noah began to be a man of the soil. So do you remember a pattern from Adam with this? Like, as you listen, do you remember? Like when Noah began to be a man of the ground, to till the ground, to work the ground. And I think, again, like wave on wave of like why and what is it about? What is it about? He says he began to be a man of the soil and he planted a vineyard. So he's working the ground and he plants kind of this fruit garden. And it's like, okay, you know, this I see similarities here. Like he's planted this, he's working this. And then it says he drank of the wine and became drunk and lay naked. You're like, okay, like this may require more thought for you, but Adam and Eve were not supposed to eat of the one fruit in the midst of the garden. And you would say, well, no, it wasn't commanded not to eat of the fruit of his garden, was he? Like, why is it wrong? But he did end up laying there naked. It wasn't like a great scenario that happened. He probably shouldn't have been consuming in this way, but even more so. Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the garden, and then they realize, we're naked. And it's kind of funny. You're like, wow, like it's like this wave-on-wave imagery of why? What on earth? Why is it? And because it's real, this is not fake stories, you have to ask yourself, how perfectly can it align, and how much can Moses take true events and line them up to tell us something by repeated imagery, because you've only got real events to work with. So you have to ask yourself, how perfect does it need to be in order for my mind to be like, why is this repeating? And so you ask yourself all these things, but he says he drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. And it says, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and went and told his older two brothers who were outside. So apparently there's something in here that we didn't see, that he maybe made fun of them or something, but he comes in and he finds, you know, here's Noah. He's drunk and naked and sprawled out on the ground, and he must have went and said, this is funny. We'll see later on. But if you think of Adam and Eve, they went and found that that they were like, because we have sinned, we now know that we're naked, and we have the shame and this need to be covered. And remember how God comes and he takes a garment and he makes a garment and he clothes and he covers their nakedness. And remember how Jesus comes and he clothes our nakedness, and all the New Testament things that we pulled in, that he was crucified in nakedness, and that he bears that shame and covering it. And so we've seen that before, so I think it helps us understand why we may see this again. But it says that, there's two other sons of Noah, and it says in 23, it says, so Shem and Japheth took a garment, and it says they laid it over their shoulders, and they walked backwards, and they covered the nakedness of their father. And it's like, well, this is interesting, because once again, it wasn't like Adam and Eve who were able to cover their sin and shame. It was that there was a garment prepared for them, and that their sin and shame was covered. And we can see how it points to Christ. And like, even though this is maybe not as clear, I ask myself, well, how close can Moses come? He is using real stories, and why does it align? And is it, in my mind, this is where I'm saying, there's like this wave-on-wave effect that if you didn't see the previous pattern, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense on the second hit. And then we'll see it again where this happens, and we're like, what? Why is this happening? And we'll see it again and again where there's this wave-on-wave that Moses seems to line up all of his stories, that there's the bigger picture that keeps happening and the smaller pictures, if you can follow that, okay? So anyway, it says that when Noah woke and saw what his youngest son had done to him, he said, cursed is Canaan. And this is interesting too, because, they're real stories. How perfectly can you line them up? But I ask myself, what did God do? So he clothes their nakedness, and then he says, what is this that you have done? And Noah says, what is this that you have done? And then God puts a curse on them that will be for them and all their generations. And he says, this is not only for you, Ham, but this is for all your generations, that they are cursed because of this sin. And you're like, why is this story so similar? It's like bizarre in a certain sense, that you're like, it's real stories, but how close can they line up? It's pretty close in my mind. But anyway, there is more here than I can put together in one message, and certainly I've tried to piece this together through the months and maybe try to bring understanding to why we see this patterning and how it all points to Jesus. But I kind of want to wrap it up with this overview of what is like a wave-on-wave pattern, and why repetition? What is the point of repetition? And so if we think about it, and I think it's maybe not even that, like I say, if you were to just study Noah, I don't know if you'd get the point. But because it was so clear salvational with Adam the first time, I think it's kind of like an echo. Like there's this echo of salvation that's coming through. So if you think of this all started with Adam. And it says the earth was covered with water, right? And so we go to Noah, and the earth is covered with water again. And then with Adam, it says that God took the water and drew out the dry land again, right? So with Noah, God took the water and reduced it and brought out the dry land. And then it says that we also remember that the Bible said that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters when the waters was there. And then with Noah, it says that the ark was hovering over the face of the waters when the water was there. And then it says that God took and he drew back the dry land, and he put Adam in dominion, to have dominion over it, and to be fruitful and multiply in it. So then when the dry land is drying back with Noah, that God gives Noah dominion, and he says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And it's like this repeated idea. And then he says he gives him charge of the animals, right? Adam is like, God takes time to give him charge of these animals, and he lists these animals, and God does a very similar thing with Noah, where he lists all these lists of animals, and he gives Noah at times charge of these animals, both entering the ark and when they go out, that he says you'll have dominion over them. And it's just like, why the similarity and the similar lists and the similar things happening? Also it says that Adam became this worker of the ground, and it says that Noah became a worker of the soil, and it says that Adam was the one who would tend this garden, and then it says that Noah plants a vineyard, and he's like a vineyard tender, and then like there's so much things about Jesus in a vineyard, and like even Jesus in a garden, or Jesus in the garden, and what, like where they fall and where they sin and where Jesus does right, and so much that I can't even pull out for you. But even like the idea that when Jesus rises from the dead and he is the good one, after spending this time in the garden, he's even mistaken as being the gardener. They're like, are you the gardener? Like, that's who we thought you were. But there's like this light imagery that like portrays like failure and success through Christ, like in a lot of just these interesting ways. But they both eat of the fruit of their garden. They both find themselves naked. They both are covered by a garment, that their sin, their shame is covered up. There's a curse spoken at this time to both parties, that there's this curse that goes on. There's this punishment for sin, that both of them have these similar effects. There's also like murder and consequence that shows the wickedness of the earth. The first thing that happened is like Cain kills his brother Abel, and it says that his blood cried out from the ground to God, and God is like, shedding of blood. This is like the peak of sin that I hate. And then when we come along with Noah, like Moses just goes into this random thing about, murder is wrong and shedding of blood is wrong, and like it's just like it fits the puzzle pieces, the pattern. And he talks about how he does not want this, and this is the things he does not want. But it's just like, I believe that Moses is lining up these things for our understanding. You remember that the rest in the number 7 that was used with Adam, that God said on the 7th day there is rest, and he shows 777 through creation. And then again with Noah, his name means rest. Noah means rest. And we saw the 777 and the parallels and the thought of the promise of rest that would come through Noah. And ultimately where I'm going with this is there's more than I could pull out and more than I could give you understanding for. But here's what I want you to think about, if nothing else, is to understand why I believe the Bible has this echoing effect. That why is there this patterning that's just kind of like hitting you over and over and over. And I think it's ultimately the value of blood. That there would be salvation through blood, and the punishment of sin, that there would be punishment for sin, and that there would be mercy, and that there would be covering for sin, and that there would be grace that would follow up, that there would be rest, right? That there would be rest one day. We all like, why are we in this sinful world with so many bad things, that our mind would go to rest, that we would think, oh, there's a place of rest, and there is a day when the earth will be good. There's a day when sin will be wiped out. There is a day when dominion will happen, when God's people will inherit the earth, where the meek and the people who have faith will inherit the earth and multiply in it, and that there will be potentially a garden like this place of bliss where things work out and they go well. But ultimately, it's something that I don't think that you can grasp maybe through individual verses and passages, but in the big picture, you'll see that this is going to happen again. It's going to happen. These things are going to repeat not only through Abraham and through Joseph and through all the people that Moses is going to bring up, but it's also going to echo through the entire New Testament, that the New Testament authors are going to be pulling off of these things and painting a picture of the truth in the New Testament. And it's just a very big way of looking at the Bible, that if you can tie it all together and remember the things that go through it, there's like this bizarre, like powerful, kind of like perpetual hitting you with truth that is like bigger than the verses themselves, I believe. And hopefully maybe through time I'll be able to pull that out, or maybe I have begun to do that already. I don't know. It's hard. I keep saying I'm going to try to go to easier things to understand. It's super hard doing Old Testament. It really, really is. And anyway, I might just do one more message and then take a break from it. We'll see. But it's crazy. But again, it's like it's divine. It's amazing. Like, how can real things and real events give you so much information of the future, like to even mold our minds to understand who Jesus would be and the things that he would do? I think it's just incredible how the Bible works, and how cool it is, how much thought it is. It's so much more than, to be written over thousands of years by so many authors, but yet it all is one story, and so hidden in, like, threaded through it all. It's quite amazing. If nothing else, maybe it made no sense at all to you, but if nothing else, I hope it shows that the Bible it's divinely written and powerful. Like, it's like what it is, it couldn't be written by, you could not pick, 50 individuals and have them write a book like this, not knowing each other, that blended like this, that worked like this, that real events point to things like this. It's impossible. The truth of the Bible is outstanding. But anyway, hopefully that shows you just at least one way to view the Bible, to understand the Old Testament, to ask yourself, why on earth is this story in here? And sometimes it's bigger than what it is just in an individual portion. So anyway, let's go ahead and close in a word of prayer this morning. Our God and Father, I just pray that you just give us understanding in these things. They're so difficult, so hard to pull out and grasp and teach, and I just pray that you just give us correct thinking and understanding. And I pray that too it would be a blessing to us to just understand the majesty of the Bible, that you could take real lives and shape them and form them into so many things that are futuristic, that we could know and understand and see to be true in our day and age, and just to mold our minds to understand who Jesus would be on his appearing, and the future that we have, that we could look forward to these things, even pictured from the beginning of time, Lord, that you knew. And I just pray that you just help us to grasp these things, and I just pray this in your Son's name. Amen.